Okay, Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone. Let's start with Srimad Bhagavatam. Today we'll be doing Canto 2, Chapter 10. So Canto 2 is called the Cosmic Manifestation. Chapter 10 is Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. So we'll actually try to cover as many shlokas as possible. Before that, let's do the invocation prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraid Ashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Manadamadam Shri Chaitanya Ishwara. Hare Krishna. Again, welcome everyone. So I'll be sharing my screen. Okay, before I share my screen, let's actually look at where we are. In chapter 10, we are going to call, this chapter is called Bhagavatam is the answer to all the questions. Very interestingly, if you see the previous chapter where the Lord gave the answers to the questions that were asked earlier. So specifically in the chapter 9, shloka number 43, 44. So you have a wonderful shloka in 44. Maybe I can share the screen and we can discuss. Yeah, this is shloka 44 from chapter 9. So here we would have already touched upon this point that we are going to discuss further today. So it says, Tasma idam bhagavatam puranam dasha lakshanam proktam bhagavata praha pritihi putraya bhutakrat. So it says, thereupon the supplementary Vedic literature Srimad Bhagavatam, which was described by the personality of Godhead and which contains 10 characteristics, was told with satisfaction by the father Brahma to his son Narada Muni. Okay, further, this was at the end of this chapter, right? So further, it says that Narad Muni then went on to tell it to the most glorious Vyasadeva. So that's how we saw. So this particular piece that says Dasha Lakshanam, 10 characteristics of this Mahapuran, which is Srimad Bhagavatam, we'll actually be discussing that part today. Okay, so it says why this whole thing is coming. So at the end of the chapter, Sukadev Goswami is telling, my dear Parikshit, let me explain to you, explain to your question of what's the question. Your question was how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead. So there are two pieces, right? So how did the universe manifest, and also the gigantic form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which we commonly known as the Virata Rupa. Okay, so today's topic will be technical. I'll try to keep it as light as possible. We haven't still hit all the pastimes of the Lord, which will be coming, and we will also discuss where and how the pastimes will come and where are the technical aspects. Now, before we get into this particular discussion, we also will try to understand another nice and important point, which is we see that there are 18 Mahapuranas, and it is said that this supplementary Bhagavatam has this Dasha Lakshanam. Now, are there only 18 Puranas? No, there are quite a few Puranas. So what happens? Why are some Puranas called the Mahapuranas? We know some of them, right? So it could be the Vishnu Purana or the Garuda Purana or the Bhagavat Puran, which is Srimad Bhagavatam, and so on. So the 18 Mahapuranas. What is the background to this, right? So firstly, there are certain mandatory topics that are supposed to be covered for a Purana to become Mahapurana. Okay, there are set of topics. So for example, creation is one of the topics, and creation is not a straightforward how it was created. So what is the multiple levels of creation? What are the different dynasties? What are the different avatars? What are the different kind of leelas? What is the cosmology? What are demigods, the sages, etc., etc. These topics have to be elaborately covered so that the person who reads this Purana has the understanding from all the aspects. Now, if I come back and ask any of us here, saying that what would you like to hear, including Parikshit Maharaj, what was the answer? He wanted to hear about Sri Krishna. And in the first canto itself, in the very beginning of the first canto itself, we saw these are the various avatars, and then the Mula Shloka that came in. What was that? Ete Jamsa Kalapumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Okay, so already it was established that Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan. Everything else is either Amsha or Kala, or these are expansions or for primary or the secondary set of expansions of this personality of Godhead. That's already mentioned, and then the beginning of certain Leelas was also discussed. Now, if you hear, if we are given 12 cantos of only Leelas, you would happily take it. Right, so none of us will go back and say that, oh, I would want to know how this creation happens. Why is Earth placed in the 7th position? What is on top? What is at the bottom? What is the role of Brahmaji? If we are attracted to Krishna, for us, only Krishna Leela would be sufficient. And people actually do it. Even today when they say, oh, Bhagavatam Parna hai, to let's go to 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, that's why Srila Prabhupada made it very clear, saying that we should have a systematic way of reading. So we have already discussed that earlier, right? So how Srimad Bhagavatam starts from the lotus feet of the Lord, goes all the way to the beautiful lotus face of the Lord, which is the 10th canto. But if we don't understand or go sequentially, we may get bewildered, because we will not be able to understand all the sweetness that's there in the 10th canto or the beautiful Leelas of the Lord. So there are two aspects, right? So the greatness of the Lord and the sweetness of the Lord. When we understand systematically, when we talk about creation, the cosmic manifestation, we talk about the different avatars, we talk about the sages and the cosmology and the demigods and their positions, how the Panchabhutas come in, how the Tanmatras come in. When we just get a brief of all this, and then we understand the entire thing is actually what is there in the Vibhuti Yoga. If you remember the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it talks all these are just a fragment of the Lord's creation. And then here is the Lord. He is doing the different Leelas. Mother Yashoda is tying him up, he's lifting the Govardhana hill, and so on. Then you'll start relishing the sweetness of this great personality of Godhead. So the greatness and the sweetness have to go hand in hand. Okay, that's why Srimad Bhagavatam becomes such a beautiful Purana. The Amala Purana, the spotless Mahapurana. Okay, so this is the background of what we are going to discuss today. We are going to discuss on the 10 characteristics and further details around those 10 characteristics. Okay, I may not take up the entire time depending on how quickly we can go, but let's see. So I'm just sharing my screen. Let me come here. So we will see a summary. This will make it easy. I'm using the reference from Gaurang Darshan Prabhu. This is from Bhagavad Shubodhini. I think I did it last time as well. This gives an overall summary of this entire chapter, what it contains by the various shlokas. We refer it multiple times when we are trying to do deep dive studies, when we're doing Bhakti Vaibhav and so on. Okay, so this chapter basically has about 51 shlokas. So the first 9 shlokas are going to talk about the characteristics of the Mahapurana. Okay, so we'll be talking about what are the 10 characteristics, very importantly. We'll also see what is the purpose of these 10 characteristics, or rather, like it says in the second shloka, we'll be talking about why are other 9 characteristics important. What is the 10th one? We'll actually see that. Then we will define each of these 10. So this becomes the first set. The second set obviously is about the primary creation, which is called the Sarga, and it will also touch upon the Virata Rupa. So we will see that how we already know. I'm assuming we know. We'll also briefly touch upon Karnodaksha Vishnu, Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and how things form from there on. Not much from the Kshirodaksha Vishnu perspective. We will anyway briefly see that, and then the second part of it, which will probably be covered somewhere in the middle of Sarga, we will stop. And next week we will probably cover from the rest of Sarga, which is the primary creation of the Lord, and Visarga, which is going to be the secondary creation. Who does it? What happens? We will see it later. And this chapter ends after all this explanation. It ends by the Shaunakadi Rishi asking Suta Goswami, saying that, oh, we have heard about all this. Can you also give more details through the Vidura Maitreya Samvada? Okay, we'll see briefly about it, which is the reason or which is the lead to starting the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so this is going to be the flow. This is the last chapter in the this is the last chapter in the second canto. Yes, I'll go back to the shlokas. Okay, so like I said, little technical, bear with me. I'll try to keep it light, and if you have any questions, we can take it at the end. I'll try to answer whatever to the best of my knowledge. Okay, so the first verse, pretty famous. Many of us should be knowing this verse, at least the content of this verse for sure. So Sri Sukha Uvacha Atra Sargo Visargascha Sthanam Poshanam Utayah Manvantareshanukata Nirodho Muktirashrayah. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 10 divisions of statements regarding the following: the creation of the universe, sub-creation, planetary systems, production by the Lord, the creative impetus, the change of Manus, the signs of God, returning home, back to Godhead, liberation, and Saman Poman. Saman Ponam is going to be the last one, which is the 10th one. Okay, so now that we have read the first shloka, I'll read the second shloka. After that, we'll go translation by translation. Dasamasya vishuddhartam navanam iha lakshanam varnayanti mahatmanah shrutanarthena chanjasa. To isolate the transcendence of the summum bonum, the symptoms of the rest are described sometimes by Vedic inference, sometimes by direct explanation, and sometimes by summary explanations given by the great sages. Okay, we will read a few more shlokas and then we will discuss this first set together. The elementary creation of the 16 items of matter, namely the 5 elements: fire, water, land, air, and sky, sound, form, taste, smell, touch, and the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and mind, is known as sarga, whereas subsequent resultant interactions of the modes of material nature is called visarga. Okay, we will stop here. What I would probably do is I'll go back, uh, go by subject matters, and then we can see the explanation. That will make it easy. Okay, now that we have read the first set of shlokas and translations, let's also do the prayers, taking blessings of the parampara, and then we can start. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsri Shri Rupam Sakrijatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha. हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगतपते गोपेशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी ऋषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Okay, so the very first shloka talks about atra sarga visargascha sthanam poshanam utayah manvantara ishanukata nirodho muktir ashraya. These are the 10 subject matters. So the very first subject matter is called the sarga. Sarga means creation by the Supreme Lord, or creation by the Supreme Lord's direction. So this is also called the primary creation. Now, at the beginning, so we will go back to what we already know, right? So we have the Karanodakashaya Vishnu. Karanodakashaya Vishnu is lying on the Karana ocean or the causal ocean. He is the Karana or the cause of all causes. He is the cause of this universes that come out from the pores of his body. We saw this in the first canto. Now, these universes that come out from the pores of his body, as soon as they come out, what happens inside that universe is becomes the primary or the first set of creation. Okay, there are some details that we have already seen. So this sarga happens only once for the universe. That happens only in the beginning of the universe. We have already seen a bit of it earlier in the second canto. A lot more details will come in the third canto along with the Vidura Maitreya Samvada. Okay, when we read the third canto, we'll be reading a lot more on the primary creation or the sarga aspects of it. Okay, now coming to the second piece. So what is the second piece? The second piece is called the visarga or the secondary creation. Okay, so whenever we talk about in the universe, within the Brahmanda, who is the creator, we always say, oh, creation is done by Brahmaji, destruction by Lord Shiva, and maintenance by Lord Vishnu. This is very common. So this creation by Brahmaji is what we tell. And we just mentioned that, oh, primary creation happens or the sarga happens by the Supreme Lord himself. So the secondary creation is what happens by Lord Brahma. So all the primary elements are provided provided in the sarga stage. Okay, the elements of creation, we just read the 16 elements, right? So all those 16 elements, including the earth, water, fire, air, ether, the tanmatras, the senses that are working and all that, including the mind, everything is provided in the sarga stage. Okay, we'll also talk about how the jivas are also provided in the first stage of sarga. Everything is given to Lord Brahma. Now it is Lord Brahma who then starts the rest of the creation. He packages these things and then he decides who gets what body, where they can lie, which part of the universe they will lie, and so on. And all this happens with the interaction with the modes of material nature. Okay, so this second set is called the Visarga. Details will again come in the third canto, second half of the third canto, and fourth canto. The Visarga details will come. Okay, why am I mentioning the cantos? If someone is making notes, you can make notes of this. This will be further used as a reference point when we actually end these 10 topics. Okay, so Sarga primarily we saw some of it in second canto. We'll be seeing a lot more in the third canto beginning. Visarga we will see in the second half of the third canto and in the fourth canto, a little bit in the fifth canto as well. Now, I'll not go back to the shlokas. Let me finish off this, then we can go back and refer to the shlokas if you have covered all the points, and then we will continue with the rest of the topics. Sarga Visarga, Sthanam. Sthanam is the third point. So Sthanam is basically the position of the various living entities. Now the material world is created. In the created world, who goes where? Okay, which planetary system, what is the kind of living entity, what happens to them? So sthanam is the right situation or the right position for the living entity. Okay, so you will see that how, when we all know how a living entity gets a type of body, right? So we have already discussed about what is the karma that we carry and what is the consciousness that we have. And based on that algorithm that Lord Brahma has, he's going to put you in a certain kind of a body and place you in the certain position within this universe. Now, this is a huge subject matter by itself, this Sthanam. This is basically the universe's, the geography of the entire universe, entire Brahmanda. Okay, within the earth, you know, there is a difference between the South Indian and the North Indian. There's a difference between someone who is staying in Karnataka versus someone who's staying in Kerala in terms of you know in terms of the entire bodily structure itself, from the color to the tongue, taste, food habits, blah blah blah. Now imagine when we spread it across countries. India by itself is a small continent, but across continents, if you go, it's going to be hugely different. Now, if you look at from Brahmaji's angle, he's got the entire Brahmanda, and then this is Sthanam is basically the the geography of the entire Brahmanda. What's in the higher planetary system, lower planetary system, what are the characteristics and how are they subdivided within each of these. Okay, this whole details is part of this sthanam, position of the living entity within the created world. Now, this one is basically the subject matter that we will see in the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, second half of fifth canto. Very important because if you look at, you would have seen the Goloka chart that's usually there in the temple, or you would have heard of the temple of Vedic planetarium that's coming up in Sridham Mayapur. Some of the basis for it is coming from this fifth canto, because where what is placed, basically the positioning is the sthanam angle to it. Okay, so whenever you visit Sridham Mayapur, or when you have seen a Goloka chart and all this creation and within the universe, all these things that are there, which planetary system, who is there, how is it working, how is it functioning, where is it rotating around, what is it rotating around, and all those things, this all comes from this positioning aspect of the sthanam. Okay, so we have covered Sarga, Visarga and Sthanam. We'll go on to the fourth one, which is Poshanam. Poshanam is again one of my favorite topics. It's basically, Poshanam means maintenance, but Poshanam actually, the right way to understand is protection offered by the Lord to his devotees. Poshanam is the protection. Okay, now there might be some fortunate devotees who would be there in the call, but most of the time, even though we are devotees, even though I'm a devotee, there are a lot of times that I get distracted and I fall down. I lose, I do not regard to all the moral codes that I'm supposed to be doing. I lose it sometimes, right? So ideally, as a devotee, we should avoid doing, uh, falling down activities knowingly. But unknowingly, we do fall down, we do commit mistakes, offenses, and so on. Knowingly, we should not. But then the mercy that flows from the Lord, what we call as the costless mercy that flows from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, offers protection to us. And these details are part of the sixth canto. Okay, simplest of example for Poshanam is the story of Ajamila. So all of us know the story of Ajamila. So Ajamila was a devotee, got diverted, distracted, fell down from his Brahminical position, led a life of absolute, in today's world, normal material life, but from a Vedic scripture, absolutely unacceptable kind of a lifestyle. Getting married at a very old age as well, again and again, going to prostitutes and so on. So Ajamila's story, if you look, he had so much of a fall down. Then, when he was about to leave his body, in his deathbed, he remembered his son. And he called him out, saying, "Oh, Narayana, you come with me, please." His son was very young, and this person is at the age of dying. And he's calling out his son, Narayana. And suddenly, the Vishnu Dutas come, and they protect him against the Yamadutas who are waiting for him, who actually scared Ajamila. Now, why we know this story? Why am I touching on this story that we already know? Ajamila then got a second chance. We have seen that book that Srila Prabhupada has so wonderfully given us. The second chance he gets. And then what happens to Ajamila is the rest of it. So even though the devotee falls down, the Lord very mercifully protects us. And these aspects are the discussion points for this subject matter, which is Poshanam. Why is it important? Is because when we know the Lord is protecting us, it's not that it gives us a license to fall down, but it gives us the confidence that I may not be qualified, but I have a person who's going to definitely take care of me. And that mercy flows through our spiritual master, flows through Srila Prabhupada, flows through the senior Vaishnavas. Okay, so that's Poshanam. The next topic is the Uti. Uti is the inclination or the impetus to perform activities. it talks about various activities that are performed by various kind of people, and so basically we can classify any of our activities as fundamentally two activities. What are they? The auspicious activities and the inauspicious activities. So the auspicious activities, when do we perform? When we have the right kind of pious credit and we want the right kind of pious credit. That means it is our pious activities plus the mindset in doing these activities. Then it makes our activities, or we are tempted or we are inclined to do auspicious activities. On the other side, inauspicious activities, just due to our previous karmas, we are put into a situation when our mindset is not controlled. So we are actually performing inauspicious activities. This part we already know. What happens when we perform auspicious activities, when we perform inauspicious activities? That is also part of Uti. Right? So the result of good activities and the results of bad activities is what forms the Uti topic. Discussed primarily in the, not primarily, but discussed in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a lot of discussion in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where we talk about demoniac people performing demoniac activities, and born in a demoniac family, someone performing a auspicious activity. Okay, so the simplest, easiest, wonderful example of Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad Maharaj. Okay, that's discussed here in the Uti concept. Now, obviously, how can we forget? In just about 5-6 days, we have the wonderful opportunity of participating in the Narsimha Chaturdashi function. So, when I was reading this, I was thinking, wow, this is something that we should definitely connect, even though the topic is somewhere else. But look, when we talk about Poshanam, the protection of the Lord, or the costless mercy of the Lord for the maintenance of ourselves, knowingly, unknowingly, we fall down, someone is holding on to us. And then we talk about Uti, that saying that even though very inauspicious, or I'm born in a situation where there are a lot of inauspiciousness around me, like Prahlad Maharaj, I can still hold on to the Lord, because all I need to do is show that sincere inclination for wanting the Lord. Uti is inclination for performing activities. So that is something that is very much in our control. Right. So, I mean, right from our childhood, or right from whatever certain age, we would have got tempted to a certain activity. It could be music, it could be movies, it could be sports. There's so much of discussion at office where we go. There's so much of discussion that happens about the cricket match that's going on in India right now. The Premier League, and then there's so much that was there a few months back around the World Cup that was happening somewhere in Qatar, I think this last year, and so on. So there is so much temptation that comes from all directions, and how much can we avoid ourselves? So we had a very nice discussion recently, saying that, Prabhu, there is so much of flow of all this that's coming in. How do I avoid, and how much should I not take, or how much can I take? Because we know that there is so much of newspaper, there's so much of news. Even some of the senior sannyasis within the ISKCON movement are up to date on what's happening, including my own Guru Maharaj. So how do they actually know up to date, but are able to not get influenced by this? Right. So what is the kind of activity that we need to perform? Well, the answer that I got from senior Vaishnava is that, look, getting up to date on news or sports or whatever it is, just because we had the habit in the past, that itself is not wrong. But the moment you start enjoying that, the moment you start relishing, the moment you start getting diverted, saying that, oh, Sachin Tendulkar hit a century, this time his son is playing, his son is also playing well, you start getting involved in that, then you're doing activities that are not progressive to your spiritual or conducive to your spiritual life. Okay, and you need protection, come over, pray to Narsimadev. So this is the topic of Uti. Okay, in continuation in this topic of Uti is also the description of Varnashrama system. The Varnashrama also falls here, because we need to know what is the right activity that we need to do. It's not that one size fits all, right? So each of us have our own Varna and our own ashrama in which we perform the activity, at what age, what kind of activity is conducive for spiritual progress, what are the activities that are not conducive as well. We should know these things. All these things fall under this topic of Uti. So we have discussed 5: Sarga, Visarga, Sthanam, Poshanam, and Uti. So we'll move on. If there are questions, please make a note of it. We'll try to answer at the end of it. Okay, we'll move on. So the next topic is the Manvantara. Okay, so Manvantara is the reign of all the Manus. So we all know who is Manu. Manu is the father of mankind. The word mankind comes from Manu, and Manu has given a set of rules for the how the humankind or the mankind has to behave. What are the activities that we should do, which will take care to ensure that there is welfare in the society. Okay, so we have all heard of Manusmriti, the rules and regulations that are coming in Manusmriti and so on. Now there is a bit of a background to who are Manus. Manu, what is a Manu? Right, so we know that today we talk about we are in the 7th Manvantara, and we have heard some famous names, like it could be Swayambhu Manu, or somewhere we would have heard of Chakshusha Manu, or Vaivasvata Manu that we are currently handling, and so on. So how does this whole thing work? Now we have spoken about Lord Brahma, right? So Lord Brahma does secondary creation, Visarga. And when does he do the secondary creation? We said he does it every day. Correct? Initially I said Sarga happens once in the beginning of the creation of the universe, stays there. That means all the raw ingredients are provided once. The cooking happens, which is Visarga, every day of Brahma. Now, every day is also called the Kalpa. So, bit of a background so that it becomes easy for us to understand the importance of knowing Manu is that, so we are in the Kali Yuga. We have the 4 Yuga together, Kali, Dwapara, Treta, and Satya Yuga. 4 put together is called the Mahayuga or the Divya Yuga. These are 4. Into 1,000 such yugas. It's a cycle of 4 yugas, right? So from Satya, Swatya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali, it again goes back to Satya. So this cycle of 1,000 times happens to be 12 hours of Brahma. The activities happen for 12 hours of Brahma. This 12 hours of Brahma is called one Kalpa. Or in simple, we call it as 1 day of Brahma. 1 day is 12 hours. Similar is the night. In the night, Brahma goes to sleep. There is a partial annihilation. We'll talk about it. There's a partial pralaya that happens. And then when Brahmaji comes back in the morning, because there's a pralaya, he has to recreate, or he has to redo the activity of Visarga. Okay. Now in this 1 day of Brahma, which is your 4 Divya Yugas into 1,000, the cycle of 1,000 Mahayugas, that one has 14 different Manu. 14 different Manus. So all these are, Manu is a position, it's not a person. Manu is a position, and there will be qualified personalities, qualified Jivatmas who actually will take up this position of Manu, and they will ensure that there are certain rules and regulations that come in. Okay, this is all, lot of details are there in Manusmriti on how a mankind has to behave. Okay, last time when I was talking about Manusmriti somewhere in the temple class, someone came and told me, Prabhu, this is too confusing, too difficult for us to follow. You shouldn't have even touched upon it. I'll give an example again today, because this is something, this is probably the only example that I've heard of. So Manusmriti, one of the things that it says, if you see a person without a tilaka on the forehead, you should immediately jump into the Ganges with your clothes on, because there's so much of contamination that will come. It's just one example that is there. We are very fortunate. We are in Prabhupada's movement. We are protected from all sides, but we can't follow everything that's there in Manusmriti, not even the one that I just told. Because if we try to follow this, then literally we have to stay either in the Ganges with clothes on, or we should just stay in the bathroom. You just cannot come out of it, right? So you'll always be taking bath, because you're not just going to see people. You're going to see people having different types of tilaka, doing different kind of activities. So basically, Manusmriti gives you what are the pious and the impious activities, which we just discussed in Uti, what we should do, how the Varnashrama, what we should follow. The rules are coming from here in the Manvantara piece. Okay, the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam talks about it. The very first chapter of 8th canto, if I'm right, it's about the Manus, the administrators of the universe. Manus are the administrator. There is a particular, when they have an office that takes care of that particular peace in the day of Brahma. Okay, there's a certain number of Chaturyugas that fall under the Manvantara category. Okay, we will move on. We will move on to the easier topics. So the next topic is the Isha Anukata. Isha Anukata. Okay, Isha is the Supreme Lord. Kata is the Leela or the pastimes Anukata. So pastimes are the Leelas of the Lord, basically Isha Anukata. The different avatars of the Supreme Lord, and many times the avatars of the Supreme Lord connected with his devotees. This is the subject matter of Isha Anukata. This is described vividly, elaborately in various cantos, typically in the ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, talks about this Isha Anukata, wherein we also see a summarized version of Lord Ram's pastime, the condensed version of Ramayana, if you have to call it, right? So that's also there in the ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, this is on Isha Anukata. There's a lot more on the pastimes of the Lord. We can probably talk about it when we have the time for it. So now we have seen the creation, the subdivisions of creation, the rules and regulations, everything. Then we come down to this topic of Nirodha. So when there is a creation, obviously there should be something which is going to talk about annihilation. So Nirodha is basically what happens when there is a pralaya or the destruction of the universes. So we had Sarga at one end or Visarga at one end and the Nirodha at the other end. Okay. So when we talk about how the material universe comes into picture, what are the elements and everything, we should also know how the material universe gets destroyed. And we know that there are multiple levels of destruction. Okay, material universe, obviously we know that it's not a permanent place, right? So this is temporary. So at the end of Brahma's life, this entire universe goes back. I said it goes back into the body of Karnodaksha Vishnu. So that Brahmanda is over. And that one is just one breath of Mahavishnu. But coming down to Brahmaji lives like that for 100 years. And one day of Brahma, we already saw 12 hours is one kalpa, and that is 4 Divya Yugas into 1000 cycles, right? So huge timeline. Now, this pralaya doesn't happen only once. It is not like in the beginning where there was creation, at the end there will be destruction. No, it's not like that. There are multiple levels of pralaya that happens. So some of us may know. So I'll not go into too much of details, but just briefly touching upon it, right? So there is something called a nitya pralaya that happens. There is a cycle of birth and death that we go through. That is also pralaya. That means I lose this body, I get into another body, I lose that body, I get in. So there is a destruction of the body that is happening. That's also a kind of pralaya. But the pralaya that we focus on in terms of this creation or the cosmic manifestation, which is your subject, right? So it's a canto name, is what happens at the end of Brahma's day, and there is one that happens at the end of Brahma's life. There's a mini pralaya that happens between the cycles, right? So after the Kali Yuga, at the end of Kali Yuga, there is going to be a wipe out of some kind of a mankind, and then restarting of Satya Yuga, giving piety. But I'm not talking about that also. I'm just going down to the fact that at the end of Brahma's day, at the end of that one kalpa, now Brahmaji is going to switch off and go take rest. Okay, so that time there is a shrinking of this universe that happens and goes and sits in the body of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Okay, then Brahmaji wakes up in the morning. So when it's good morning, he will start the Visarga again, taking all the elements that are therein. The body of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, he starts putting the elements and the soul to it and sends it to the Sthanam, right? Now we should know all this, right? So it's that Visarga happens again by Brahmaji. Okay, this is also called pralaya. This happens at the end of Brahmaji's life, which is the Nirodha topic, and also there is a pralaya that happens at the end of Brahmaji's life, where the entire Brahmanda, entire universe collapses, doesn't go into Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, but it goes into the Karnodakshaya Vishnu's body. Okay, so this is also one of the topics that is covered in the Mahapurana, which is Nirodha. Okay, so we are down to the last two topics, very nice and easy topics, which is mukti. Mukti means, all of us know, it's liberation. There's a lot of details that are there about mukti in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Basically, what is mukti? Mukti will talk about how to get out of this material universe. How do we head back to Godhead? So a Purana becomes a Mahapurana not because it's telling you the past tense, but it's also telling you that you're suffering here and you have to get out of this place, go into a permanent situation. And this is for all the living entities. Okay, we have to give up this changeable body and take up something which is more permanent. We should start having the higher taste. What is available and how do we go there? What are the activities that we should be doing? All these topics are covered under this umbrella of mukti. Okay, and Nirodha, like I said, it's the destruction, the partial annihilation. What happens to all the souls? They actually wind up in the body of Mahavishnu, right? Or the Garbhodaksha Vishnu, depending on which level of pralaya it is. But when it talks about mukti, the living entity gets delivered out of this cycle. So that is mukti. The last, the most important topic is the ashraya. Ashraya is what? The supreme shelter. And where are we supposed to take shelter? Supposed to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord or his representatives who will direct us back to the Supreme Lord, right? So, but basically Ashraya, when we talk about from the Srimad Bhagavatam aspect, is the surrender or shelter under the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. Okay, and obviously I've covered all the cantos, at least most of the cantos, where we saw all the different topics that come in. Nirodha, if I've not mentioned, then that's predominantly there in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Mukti in the 11th, Ishanukata in the 9th, Manvantara in the 8th. We have already seen Sarga in the 3rd, Visarga in the 4th and 5th, Sthanam in the 5th canto, Poshanam in the 6th canto, Ti in the 7th canto, 8th, 9th, 10, sorry, 8, 9, 11 and 12 we have finished. So the Ashraya shelter is the one that is the most beautiful face of the Lord. That is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So very elaborate description on the Supreme Lord's activities. Very elaborate description on the Supreme Lord being our only shelter. That is the essence of all the pastimes of the Lord. Okay, though Gajendra Moksha doesn't fall into the 10th canto, in one way that's also Ashraya. But in the 10th canto, if you look at it, each and every personality actually directs us saying that I'm not looking for liberation. I'm not looking for mukti. I just want to be with Krishna, serve Krishna. That becomes shelter, irrespective of where you are, right? So, like when someone told Srila Prabhupada, at the end of life, you will go back to God. And Srila Prabhupada, like, I don't know. I might go wherever the Lord wants me to go. There is a conversation that's recorded of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, wherein he says that I see there are a lot of suffering souls on the moon. Maybe we should deliver them as well. So these personalities, they are not looking for mukti, going back, but they're fully protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are under His shelter, right? So why worry? You have the Supreme Lord taking care of you, right? So that's their position. Like one of the acharyas says, liberation is waiting at my doorstep, wanting me to come back. I just don't have time for liberation. I'm in the service of the Lord. That should be our goal. Saying that whatever I'm doing, wherever I'm doing, I know that the Supreme Lord is always protecting me. I'm fully sheltered under Him. I should just continue to do my service sincerely. Okay, and Ashraya in the 10th canto is the biggest that we know about, 89, 90 chapters. Okay, each and every part of it talks about what is that ultimate purpose of life. And it's not necessarily liberation, right? So this whole thing, these are the 10 topics that are there. So we have covered all this. I thought we'll take good 30 minutes to cover this, which I think we have done. No, so does it mean that the chapter numbers I've mentioned talk about these specific topics, specific qualities in Srimad Bhagavatam? No. The ones that I've mentioned is the predominant subject matter in all these cantos. It's not that this is the only subject matter. Okay, but as we go through cantos, there are various states that are available in each of them. There is a touch of most of these topics, underlying topics that happens between these cantos, right? So these topics are there in multiple cantos, but predominantly in a certain canto, which is what we have discussed. Okay, these are the 10 subject matters. We have covered it. I will go back. Let me share my screen and we can go through the translations. And then if there is anywhere that we need to stop, we will stop. Otherwise, we'll finish this. We'll go on to the next topic. We'll take it for a few minutes. And then if there are any questions, I'll take. Okay, so we saw this. So these are the 16 items like we should. Srila Prabhupada also mentions how our mind, intelligence and ego, this becomes one part when it comes from the sarga, and when with the visarga, when there is influence of the modes of nature, then we start, our ego starts acting. Okay, so we actually know this topic, so I'll just move on. I'm sure we have already covered on the Garbhodaksha Vishnu and the Karnodaksha Vishnu sitting on top. So that part is also there. If there are questions, then we will take it up later. Okay, the right situation for the living entities is to obey the laws of the Lord, and thus he is in perfect peace of mind under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Manus and their laws are meant to give right direction in life. The impetus for activities is the desire for fruitive work. Uti, Manvantara, all these topics we have already covered, right? Sthanam, Poshanam, protection of the Lord, right? So all these 4 topics are covered in one shloka. That's why I wanted to cover it from the other side so that then we can come back to this. Okay, so here are the descriptions of what happens with Garbhodaksha Vishnu, what happens with the first Purusha incarnation with Mahavishnu or the Karnodaksha Vishnu, and the Kshirodaksha Vishnu comes as the super soul within everyone's heart. That will come later as well, so we'll touch upon that. Okay, the science of God describes the incarnations of the personality of God and different activities together with the activities of his great devotee. Ishanukata, activities of the Lord, Kata, and of his great devotees. This is a very nice point, saying that Lord is never going to do activities alone. He is always with his devotees, and they are the easiest for us to go back to God. Directly trying to get hold of the Lord is very difficult. But if a pure devotee of the Lord says that, you know what, this person is nice, then you're in the safest of hands. Okay, so always getting attracted to the devotees of the Lord is a lot safer than trying to directly approach the Lord. The merging of the living entities along with the conditional living tendency with the mystic lying down of the Mahavishnu is called the winding up of the cosmic manifestation. This is your Nirodha. Liberation is the permanent situation of the form of the living entity after he gives up the changeable gross and subtle material bodies. Mukti. Okay, there are 2 types of living entities. We know that. Okay, the Supreme One, who is celebrated as the Supreme Being or the Supreme Soul, is the Supreme Source of the cosmic manifestation, as well as the reservoir and winding up. Thus, he is the Supreme Fountain and the Absolute Truth. It talks about the Supreme Lord's position. Okay, where we should take shelter. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the Adhyatmic person, and the individual controlling deity of the senses is called the Adidevik. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the Adibhautik person. Now we have come down to the next topic. Okay, we have covered the 10 subject matters, which was one of the ideas of today's covering. The next 2 shlokas, which is shloka 8 and 9, basically talks about the Paramatma. Now we know that in Bhagavad Gita, in the Chatushloki, we have already seen Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo Mata Sarvam Pravartate. Right? So he's the cause of everything. Right? So the Supreme Lord. Now, when we talk about him coming into every individual soul's heart, so he comes and sits as the Paramatma. Now, Paramatma is the Ashraya for the soul. So we have finished the Ashraya topic. We are coming down to the next set of topics, right? So Ashraya for the soul is the Paramatma. Okay, and the soul goes through these 3 conditions, which is Adhyatmik, Adidevik, and Adibhautik. We already know this because there is interaction. The soul through the body interacts with the matter, and that's why it goes through. When it takes shelter of the Paramatma, it is beyond this Adhyatmik, Adibhautik. Soul by itself is a spiritual entity. or everything else that is influencing the body is all material, right? So this is about shloka 8 and 9. This is what it talks about Adhyatmik Adidevik. All three of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are independent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter is independent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter. Okay, instead of trying to take shelter within this material realm, instead of trying to find something in the material realm, we should take shelter of the supreme personality of Godhead, who is beyond the influence of anything in the material world. No modes of nature, no influence of Adhyatmik, Adibhautik, the living entities that is the higher planetary systems, your company and your own mind that is all influencing you beyond all this. So Lord doesn't have any of these influences from outside. So taking shelter of him is our safest bet. Okay, so we'll move on to shloka number 10. The purports are very nice and huge. Please take time and read the purports. This is like a mandatory statement that we have to always know that we are doing a summary study here. We are going to focus only on the shlokas and the translation. We should definitely go back and read Srila Prabhupada's purport. Otherwise, our Srimad Bhagavatam is never complete. After separating the different universes, the gigantic universal form of the Lord Mahavishnu, which came out of the causal ocean, the place of appearance for the first Purusha Avatara, entered into each of the separate universes, desiring to lie on the created transcendental water, Garbhodaka. Okay, so it talks about how Mahavishnu comes within each of the universe as the Paramatma of the universe. Now, so we know that each of our body has the Lord in our heart, who is the Paramatma, and all the Paramatmas within the material Brahmanda, within one creation of Brahmanda, within every living entity, they are all expansions of Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. Kshirodakashaya Vishnu is the cause for all the Paramatmas. Okay, but for the entire universe itself, there is a Paramatma, and that is Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, who is expanding from Mahavishnu or the Karanodakashaya Vishnu. Okay, so if you remember the universal form, the Goloka chart, if you want, I can just pull up quickly here. If you look at this whole Goloka chart, I'm just looking at the universal aspect, if that can come in. That's easier to bring up. So we should definitely go back to this Goloka chart. So if you see here, I'm just expanding. I know the resolution is a little low. I'll not be able to download this for now. So, but you can see here, this is one universe. So this whole realm, no, just going back, this is the spiritual world, the one on top, just pink, blue, and red. So the center here is the Goloka. All the different petals are the different kind of leelas of Krishna, or the one below that, the blue and the red ones are the Vaikuntha Loka. Below that is the Sadashiv Loka and the Brahmajyoti. So all these details we will see further when we come down to 5th canto as well. Now within this universe, the black region which is at the bottom basically is the material world. Now this material realm will come below the Brahmajyoti, right? So from the Brahmajyoti on top is your eternal place. The one below. So here we have the Karano Daksha Vishnu. Here he's sleeping. From the pores of his body, there are different universes that come in. Each of this bubble is a universe. We take to one universe here. What is a universe? Brahmanda. So this was one Brahmanda. And here, if you see in this Brahmanda, there is this stem and there is lotus, and Lord Brahma is sitting here. So he is the secondary creator. But beyond this Brahmaji and this influencing realm, there is something else that is there outside. So you will see the different layers that are there. You will see that there is a Vishnu sleeping here with Lakshmi Devi at his lotus feet, which is the Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. There is also Kshirodakashaya Vishnu within this place, and so on. Right? So this Garbhodakashaya Vishnu is sorry, this Kshirodaksha Vishnu. Okay, Garbhodaksha Vishnu is the Paramatma of this universe. Okay, that is what is explained here. This is the universal creation. We have not come down to the secondary part of the creation at all. We will be seeing all this, but all the different planetary systems that are created and everything. We are here in the seventh planetary system, which is your Bhuloka. In that one, we are in the Earth, and from here to get out of all this, different multiple long yojanas getting all the way back to the Vaikuntha Loka, to the Goloka is very difficult. But there is a shortcut that is provided here. What is a shortcut? You can see there is a line that goes from here all the way up. That is your Hare Krishna Mahamantra. When we are chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, we are transcending this entire material realm. We are actually getting connected directly with the Supreme Lord in the eternal realm, Satchitananda place, which is your transcendental spiritual world. Okay, so again, coming back to the material world, the creation is happening. We have the Garbhodakasha Vishnu, who is the Paramatma within the universe. So we always hear the name Narayana. So the meaning of Narayana is also there in Srimad Bhagavatam. The Supreme Person is not impersonal, therefore is distinctly a Nara or a person. Therefore, the transcendental water created from the Supreme Nara is called the Nara. And because he lies down on that water, he is known as Narayana. So Garbhodaksha Vishnu, who sleeps on the Garbhodaka ocean, he is addressed as Narayana. Narayana also means the person who is our shelter. We can hear Nara and Ayana. Ayana or Sayana, he is sleeping there. Okay. One should definitely know that all material ingredients, activities, time and modes and the living entities are meant to enjoy them, exist by his mercy only, and as soon as it does not care for them, everything becomes non-existent. So simple, he is Sarva Karana Karanam. Whatever you see in the material realm, whatever you see in the spiritual realm, whatever you see which is good, which is bad, ugly, whatever it is, everything he is the cause. There is nothing that can exist without the Supreme Lord. This topic, this item, we should be extremely clear from our study of Bhagavad Gita itself, right? So everything is but the expansion or the creation or provision of the Supreme Lord. Then we go back to our Isha Upanishad sloka saying that Tena tektena punjita magradakasya svidam. What is that? Isha vasimidam sarvam yatkincha jagat jagat. So we also have this shloka that talks about each of us. See, everything is available for us to use, and we should know what is our quota. We should not go and use beyond our quota, because that's going to have a ill effect, because you are going to be suffering in this material realm because you are trying to enjoy more than what is allocated to you. The Lord, while lying on his bed of mystic slumber, generated the seminal symbol, golden in hue, through external energy of his desire to manifest varieties of living entities from himself alone. So all the, this shloka from the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Bhutani Kaunteya, Prakritim Yanti Mamikam. So every Bhuta, every living entity is actually coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which we already discussed. If Brahmaji has to do the secondary creation, has to put souls into the body and package and send it to a sthanam or the position where they have to take, the ingredient is still provided by the Supreme Lord, and these are the living entities. So we all come from the Supreme Lord, right? So this we all know. Bija Pratapita. So he is the Bija, he is the cause for all of us. Again, the influence of the Adideva, Adhyatmika and Adibhautik. Just hear from me how the potency of his lordship divides one into three, called the controlling entities, the controlled entities, and the material bodies in the manner mentioned above. Okay. Now, so each living entity gets a different body, correct? So some of them are in a managerial position for Adidevik, right? So we know all the demigods from Indra, Surya, Chandra, Varuna, Vayu to all the demigods. Everyone is in a managerial position of the Supreme, in the Supreme Lord's command, and they are all reporting to Devendra, who is reporting into Brahmaji, who reports into the Supreme Lord. There's a hierarchy. Okay, very clear hierarchy, and that's a position that they have, and they take care of a certain thing. So if there is no rain, we go and pray to Indra. Indra, depending on our situation, our prayers, and the time, he will actually provide rain at a certain place, right? So these all things we already know. We have read the Govardhan Leela saying that, okay, we don't need to pray to Indra, we can pray to Krishna. Yes, we can pray to Krishna. That is sufficient if our prayers are sincere enough, but we should never disrespect any of these personalities who are there in the managerial positions. Okay, we don't need to go to them and pray for anything. That is not our position. That's not a requirement. But we should always respect every individual uh, person, every individual. It could be a ant, it could be Indra to Indragopa, right? So it can be anything within the universe. We have to respect, because end of the day they are all souls, and every soul is very dear to the Lord. Why unnecessarily offend another soul? We should know that. Okay, from the sky situated within the transcendental body of the manifesting Mahavishnu, a sense, energy, mental force, and bodily strength are all generated, as well as the sum total of the fountainhead of the living entities. So what we are getting into is going to be, now if you go back to the Goloka chart, so the entire creation, Brahmaji is going to supply to it. Now, but this entire creation forms the Virat Rupa of the Lord. Okay, it forms the body of the Lord. Let me just share that screen back. Just give me a minute. When we initially discussed, so that's where we are getting into. So if you look at, we are into this particular piece. So let me explain this piece and then we can go back, right? So we will not be covering from 13 to 32. Too many shlokas. We would definitely wait for the next speaker to actually cover that. But we have just touched upon this. So how does this whole ingredients are used to create the second piece, right? So first thing is we have a desire, and then with the desire there's certain organ that is formed. There's a gross organ, there's a subtle organ, right? Like eyes is the gross organ, seeing is the subtle. Okay, and then there is a devata for it, and there is a tanmatra to it. Okay, uh, what we can do is we'll jump out to that table that's actually going to give us the details. Okay, so let me know if you can see the screen. This should make it very clear. We'll take one example and we will see. So for example, that's given here, right? So we have the desire to eat. So if you see, there is a sense organ that is created, which is the tongue. Okay. And so jiva and talu. Talu is the gross part of it, and jiva is the subtle. Okay. The sense devata for this jiva or the tasting happens to become varuna. You know, all of us understand, right? So if our tongue is dry, we'll get no taste. It mixes with saliva and water body, which is varuna, right? And the tanmatra is obviously the taste which we get from the tongue, and the material element, the panchabhuta, out of which this particular thing is the water. This is a simple example that we can see. So the rest of the shlokas basically talk about how each of this and who are the sense devatas and how this whole piece works. Okay, we can have a lot more detailed study of this as we see in the next week. But let me go back. We will see where we can stop. We have just started. So as the followers of the king follow their lord, similarly, when the total energy is in motion, all other living entities move, and when the total energy stops endeavoring, all other living entities stop sensual activities. Again, Lord provides, Lord takes care, and Lord decides when it has to stop. The living force, being agitated by the Virata Purusha, generated hunger and thirst, and when he desired to drink and eat, the mouth opened. We will stop here. So, Anandru Prabhu, Shri Hari Prabhu, so we can request the next speaker to start from 17 so that it's a continuous flow, because it's going to talk about each of these elements going forward. Okay, I just gave the example of the tongue. So before till here, we understand the Supreme Lord is the cause of all causes. Everything moving and non-moving is depending on him. Okay, even though it looks a lot more shlokas from 17 to 50, but it's just set of two topics. One is the sarga, the second is the visarga part, before they come down and end with the Vidura Maitreya Samvada. So we can stop here. We have close to 8-10 minutes. If anyone has any questions based on what we have spoken today, I would be happy to probably answer or share whatever I know. Okay, the class is over.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Hare
Yes,
Krishna Prabhuji.
Prabhuji. Hare
Dharat
Krishna.
Pranam.
Dharat.
Prabhuji, can you please explain about that Adi Daivik person, Adi Bhautik person? Is, I didn't understand that actually.
No. So these, so Adidevik, see, Adhyatmic, Adibhautik, and Adidevik, these are not necessarily persons, right? So Paramatma is the ashraya of the soul. Okay, who is superior to the Adhyatmic, Adibhautik, and the Adidevik manifestations. So you understand that there are three influences, right? Adidevik, Adhyatmic, and Adibhautik. So much you know. So we
Yes, yes,
talk
yes,
about
yes.
miseries caused by self, miseries caused by others, and miseries caused by the
Yes, yes, yes,
nature,
yes.
right? So because we have a certain body, we feel that we are influenced, we are suffering, right? We are suffering in this body. Oh, I've got a hand pain, I've got a I'm hungry, it's time for breakfast, prashadam, whatever. So I'm thinking that I am going through this experience. Similarly, oh, it is very hot today, it was very cold yesterday, it was raining the other day, the traffic jam had happened. You know, there are three levels. So one, the bhautika place that we see, one is the influence from the higher planetary system, which is the Devika, and from me as well. There are my mind saying that, oh, I'm not enjoying, or I'm suffering, or I'm enjoying, either ways. Now, what it says is this Paramatma, when we talk about the 8th and 9th shloka, basically it says Paramatma is the ashraya of the soul. If you are sheltered by the Paramatma, we are always going to be above the influence of any of these material things which are Aditevik, Adhyatmik, and Adibhautik. That's all. That was the point of contest. Saying that the position of Paramatma, and then we talk about how the Virata Rupa comes in. That's the flow of this. Is that okay, Prabhu? Or you want more details on Adhyatmik, Adibhautik, and Adidevik? Prabhu, you're on mute, so I'm hoping you're okay with the answer.
Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhuji. I'm in a train to
Okay.
Mayapur. That's why, sorry. so,
Okay.
so that's why my voice is having some problems. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank
No
you very
problem,
much.
Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who has any comment, anyone else who wants to add anything to the topics, because I have very briefly summarized, but there are definitely more details. There are lectures for hours together only on the first shloka, because there's so much that can be spoken about. So if anyone else wants to share anything or ask anything, feel free.